And good morning, good evening, or afternoon, depending on what part of the globe you're on and what time zone you are in. I'm your host, Brian G., host of the Biblical History Skeptics podcast, coming at you live and in living color. Thank you for tuning in and not tuning out. We have a full day ahead, a full day and night of fun and adventure. Here we go. If my player will play, would be nice. Let's hear some music to get us started, shall we? It's the circle of death, the swirl of death. Here we go. Red. Here we go. Let's see. It's Christmas. We don't want Christmas, do we? Pressurized BHSP open. Let's do it. Pressure. Oh, yeah. We're feeling a lot of pressure, aren't we? I'll turn that down. Yes, thank you so much for whoever sent that gift. I appreciate that. While we're talking about pressure, everybody can sympathize with scarring, can we not? I know for a fact, I know all about scarring. As a machinist, I'm in contact with a lot of sharp objects, should we say, and my hands literally show every single mistake I've made around sharp tools. And with that, you can get silicone scarring sheets. What this does is it lightens the scarring. So if any of you have had, if any women who've given birth who could attest to having stretch marks, this is a good product to have. And I'll tell you what, heals, lightens scars, and you can cut it to whatever length you need. It comes in tape form, you can cut it to size. So I'm using that on my hands. So get your silicone scar sheets. Silicone scar tape. Improves, heals, and lightens scars. I like that there's a product like this. Yeah, as a machinist, I've literally opened my wrist. Well, not my wrist, but the back of the palm just literally opened up. I made a stupid mistake at work, and I used what did I do? Oh, I used super glue for 2 weeks until the healing scarred. I mean, it opened it up from here to here. And it was deep. It was pretty deep. Luckily, I didn't cut it to the bone, but yeah. I used a lot of gauze, a lot of rubber gloves to keep it healed. But yes, but now that we've got silicone tape, you can use this. Put it right there on my wrist and lighten the scars. Maybe it's not too late. Cut my knuckle open on a tool. I don't know if you can see that. The lighting's not too good, but it's like right there on that first knuckle. You can see the lighting is different. Yeah, opened the knuckle. I mean, just opened it right up. So there's I got a lot of places I can use this. Oh, by the way, I had my appendix removed when I was 12, 13 maybe. I can use that. Why not? So silicone scar sheath. Please get it. Also, moving right along, I know there's been a lot of hullabaloo about the debate that we've had. The last debate between Joe Biden and Trump. And you know what? Everyone complained about Biden not sounding as good as he should have. He didn't sound as coherent as he should have. I watched the after debate video speech that he did. I'm not worried one bit. Biden was suffering from a severe cold. I'm okay. I'm okay if he doesn't sound good. Biden answered literally every question. He answered it truthfully. Donald Trump didn't answer a single question, much less with truth. So I don't care if Biden wasn't on top of his game. I'm okay with it. But yeah, as far as debate prep, they shouldn't have prepped him. He should have been napping. So, but yeah, it's pretty sad. It's pretty sad that we didn't give him the kudos that we should have. But yeah. So I'm okay. I'm okay with Biden not sounding as clear and coherent as he could have. We're in good hands. But anyway, I wanted to let you know about silicone scar sheets and let you know, hey, it can be yours. Awesome product. Please, if you're interested in lightening up any scars you've got on any part of your body, this is the way to go. This is the way to go. But and while we are waiting, I'm hoping to have a guest for the show. We'll see. We'll see if we. You know what? If you could, let's see. Oh, Jaaron is in the TikTok. I think it would be easier if he jumped on the YouTube. Let's see. If let's see, Jaaron is in the TikTok. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to restart the TikTok live. Jaaron, if you could come over to the YouTube channel. Let's see, Sweet Pea, if you could send him a link to the show, I would love for him to come over to YouTube, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to reset the live on TikTok. But yeah, come over to YouTube. I think that will be easier. That would be awesome if you could do that. All right. But once again, before I end the live, just want to let you know, just to reiterate my experience with scarring, heavy scarring, just doing regular machining, just regular machine work, and it just just scarred me all up and down my hands. I've got scars on this hand. Like I said, I opened up the back of my palm right here, and silicone scar sheets. This is the product for you. The best way to lighten scars and just to get rid of obnoxious scarring. But yeah, this is the way to go, and I'm looking forward to it. Can't wait to use it. And you can cut it into tiny strips, or you can use it as big as you want. It's good for lightening scarring, so it's good for maybe stretch marks. Maybe you've lost a lot of weight, or you've had a pregnancy and it's left scarring. This scarring sheets is the way to go. So get the product. It's on sale now. So you can see the link in the live description, and I'll also be doing a video about that as well. But yeah, lighten up those scars. Lighten it up with silicone scar sheets. So, all right. Look forward to seeing you on the live on YouTube. Take care. All right. And for that, and with that, we'll just wait until uh, our guest arrives. What in the world? Why am I getting restrictions? Okay. All right. Well, that does it for that. Let's see. Just let me just send a message to our guest. Okay. I guess we'll wait. And while we're waiting, let's go ahead and boy, this is getting ridiculous. Okay. Let's do YouTube. Let's see, debate, whistleblowing. You know what? Let's do debate. Let's hear Jesse Wells. Let's do share screen. The debate. Boom. Boom.
Last night I saw an archaeological wonder on the ESPN of war and lies. CNN's death rattle, an ancient species battle, two fossils trying to poke each other's eyes. Mom and Dad are fighting in Atlanta. I'm online pricing lobotomies. I don't wanna get no dumber, but it's better than this bummer of believing in a false dichotomy. They open up their mouths and nothing comes out. It's gonna take a lot more than the speed. I can't discern Vern, I can't perceive Steve. I don't understand Jan, I don't know Joe. I don't know Joe. Last night I took a trip to the museum. Sat and stared at wax figurines. They come for about an hour, fighting about power. Pathetic, old, and sad as they can be. Last night I saw the circle close around us as I sat and thought about deja vu. And the sound that met my ears made all hope disappear. Just what constitutes elder abuse? I can't discern Vern, I can't perceive Steve. I don't understand Jan, I don't know Joe. I don't know Joe.
All right. Give me a second. We don't need any more commercials on this show. Okay. How are you doing, Christ before Jesus, also known as Jaaron?
Yes, doing good, doing good. Just going hither and thither, to and fro throughout the world, looking for souls to deceive.
Well, speaking of deception, it's the last one. It's time. I've been holding on to this last one, just kind of. I have to muscle it down, shall we say? It's not the best tasting. So here on the show, we do random beer tastings. I'll just buy something I've never had before. I'll bring it onto the show first time, and I'll give you my opinion. Pabst is, how shall I say this? It tastes a little bit like, it reminds me of Budweiser. It may be a little better tasting than Budweiser, but it's a far stretch.
Gotcha.
I seem to gravitate more towards the darker beers like Corona Especial. What's the other one? I like Michelob Straight, Guinness.
Okay.
And for the whites, I do Heineken. Love Heineken. Let's see. Is it Blue Moon? I could do Blue Moon.
Okay.
And then what was the other one? Someone's going to remind me in the chat. Oh, there was a Vietnamese beer that I liked. Sapporo.
Really?
Sapporo or Sapporo. Yeah, you can find it selling at Walmart. And yeah, that's where I found it. And I thought, well, I'll try it once. And I was pleasantly surprised, not going to lie.
Not bad. Yeah, I'm not much of a beer drinker. The closest thing in specific that I've really done to any kind of like big tasting or flight or anything like that would be over in Las Vegas at the Coca-Cola store. They have try different sodas from around the world kind of flight. And there was a lot of sodas that they brought out. It was like 18 of them or something, like some stupid 24 even, I think it was 24, like some stupid amount of sodas. And I tried them, and they give you a little cheat sheet that says where they're from, what they're called, and a lot of them were pretty good. Some of them it was a little hard to get down, but I'm not I'm not here to knock on anybody's culture, but if you're in Italy and you drink whatever that thing is, it's called like Beverly or something, I don't know how you are able to drink it. It's rough.
Oh, goodness gracious. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, most American beers are trash. They are. I can't, I don't know what to, all of the ones you see on commercial, the ones that they're promoting, Michelob Ultra. I mean, if you've got Michelob Straight, why would you do Ultra? It's like light Corona, or there was another one that they went light on, and it's like, no, you're not drinking it for the taste. I could just tell you that. If you're worried about calorie intake, just stop drinking.
Understandable. To be fair, the only beer that I've ever really drank, and if I go anywhere and order a beer, it's Michelob Ultra. It's just that the only reason why is because I literally haven't drank anything else. I've tasted it, but I just didn't like the taste of beer. But on the day, because everybody, I think, can kind of think back to the day that they kind of accepted beer. Like, you accepted that, like, you know what, this isn't so bad. Maybe you tasted a beer in specific that you actually enjoyed for the first time. Or maybe the Stockholm Syndrome finally seeped in and you're like, you know what, I'm just going to put up with it. But ultimately, that day for me was the day that my friend had just Michelob Ultra. So if I drink anything, I don't really drink beer, but when I do, it's Michelob Ultra.
Yeah. Well, my first beer that I ever had was at a Halloween party. It was an Angry Orchard.
Yeah, that was the first one I ever tried.
Really? Yeah. I
Yeah.
love those. See, that's another one I can try. Fruit beers. There was another beer that I had while I was in Texas. It was called Blushing Monk.
Mm-hmm.
It was like anywhere from an 8 to 12% alcohol volume.
Wow.
I mean, Blushing Monk was no joke. I mean, you could
Yeah.
feel the buzz
yeah.
after half of the glass. You were like, "Ooh, okay."
All right. Yeah.
It was great. Great tasting.
Yeah. Well, I tried Angry Orchard, but I think going into it, I assumed that it would be closer to like an apple cider or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. But the outside of the bottle looked so appetizing every time. I bought like a 6-pack thinking this is going to taste awesome. And then I couldn't get through one. But then later on, I looked in the fridge and there it was, cold and refreshing and inviting, was more Angry Orchard. And I was like, should I? It looks so good. And I tried another one and nope, wasn't any better. I just couldn't do it. I couldn't do it.
Oh, man. Well, that's okay. Sorry, I just shut off one of my Bluetooths. Okay. Yeah, because I had 2 Bluetooths going on. I had to make sure I wasn't interfering. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Christ before Jesus. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, I can.
All right. My God, there are so many ways we could go for this interview. I mean, we talked about a lot.
Yes, we did. And I think there was a few things in specific that I was, maybe waiting to kind of get into. But just as a kind of a reminder to anyone who, had seen the previous interview before, and just as a quick update on what's happening with Christ Before Jesus. So my co-author and I, who sadly, again, couldn't make it tonight, he's got a young baby at home, so, it's kind of his excuse, kind of. But anyways, so we are still working a lot with stylometric analysis, which is a peer-reviewed and accepted literary analysis, which goes through texts and it attributes authorship. And as I mentioned previously before here on the show, my co-author and I, we took a look at the Greek New Testament and compared it to anything we could find in Greek from the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd century CE and the 1st century BCE as well, just to see if there was any overlap with any other authors. And as luck would have it, we found that no Christian book was written prior to the start of the 2nd century, despite the fact that Jesus' life was supposedly all within the first 3 centuries of the 1st century, or the first 3 decades of the 1st century. And in some cases, we were actually able to find the authors, attribute the authors of some of the texts of the New Testament. So definitely very exciting kind of stuff. Stylometric analysis has come a long way. It started in the 1800s. Like I said, it's been peer reviewed, it's accepted. It's something that is used in courtrooms. It is used in literary studies. Just like it's something that was used to find that Shakespeare was actually real. Because I remember back in college around that time, like 2010, 2011, I remember that there were people who were questioning whether or not Shakespeare was real or if it was just a pen name for other authors. And come to find out, he's real. Because when they ran stylometric analysis, they found that it was all coming from one particular author who wasn't other authors at the time, or other known authors at least. It could have still been, I guess, a pen name for a particular person, but it was still a particular person. It wasn't a whole bunch of people working together or something like that, or at least no known author who was writing under a pseudonym. So yeah, I mean, stylometric analysis is used in a variety of different ways. And it's a lot of fun. It's applying data science to the text of the Bible, and it's enjoyable. But our next project in specific is looking at the Book of Mormon, the Old Testament, and the Quran. And we're already making some headway and finding some pretty interesting things on that front. So it'll be really interesting coming out with that book.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I am very interested, even more so than the Book of Mormon. I am more interested in the Quran.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask you this. Of the two projects, which one are you going to be more focused on?
Like Quran and Book of Mormon, you mean?
Yeah. Which one are you going to do first?
Well, it's coming out on the same book. So we're going to, in one book, tackle the Quran, the Book of Mormon, and the Old Testament, all in one book. And it seems like a lot, but it's for the most part, the Old Testament is something that has already been talked about. There's already been some theories on different authors for the Old Testament texts and piecing together the stories and everything. And there's a lot of very clear evidence there, even in the English translations. But so we're not probably not going to focus a lot on there. Not to mention, like, it's not a lot of fun to come out and say, hey, Paul or Moses didn't exist. Moses didn't exist, because scholars are going to be like, yeah, we already knew. Like, who cares? They're just going to move on. Like, it doesn't matter. But yeah, if we come out and say, hey, Muhammad did not actually write the Quran, or Joseph Smith's tall tales of who actually wrote these books in the Book of Mormon is fabricated or false, man, I mean, that's a little bit more inciting, so to speak.
Yeah, I believe it. Now, so have you done any work on have you done any work on the Quran so far?
Yes. So far, we've been able to find that there's 4 or 5 different authors, maybe even 6, of the Quran in specific, that are distinctly different. So it's problematic because if you're thinking that it comes from Muhammad in specific, it's just not the case. It's just not. And the more that we look into the history of it, the more that we're starting to see that there's a good chance that the Quran itself was probably a thing even before the supposed birth of Muhammad. There's pieces of it, at least pieces of it, that date back further than Muhammad himself, which is interesting.
Yeah, that is.
From what we can tell, and we're continuing to look into it, this is just kind of where we're at the moment. From what we can tell, it seems as if Islam itself is more or less kind of a, I know this kind of sounds weird, but it's almost like an older, like, desert version of Mormonism, because it seems to not be its own religion from the get-go, but more of an offshoot of Christianity. The cross itself was used in a lot of symbolism for some of the earliest members of Islam, which is not, it's just weird. It's because they don't believe that Jesus died on the cross. It seems strange. So I don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
So what we can gather is that it seems like it was an offshoot of Christianity from a long time ago, and it eventually kind of became its own thing over time, probably due to just like geographical distances, because I mean, really, that's how you get differences in Christianity, is just the geographical spots. I mean, Catholicism, like Roman Catholicism, ties itself to obviously Rome, like the city of Rome. Then you have Orthodox churches that tie themselves to cities further east, with the Egyptian Coptic church, Christian church, being down in like Alexandria. So it's, there's definitely a geographical element and political element to the offshoots of religions, and Islam would be no different. And the fact that it mentioned so much that Christianity already had within it, all the tenets of Christianity, so to speak, it means that it if it wasn't an offshoot of Christianity initially, it at least was created by somebody who was very familiar with the religion.
Yeah, definitely overlap, because I mean, you've got, I mean, not Mormonism, I said Mormonism, within what they used to call them Mohammedans, those who are the followers of Muhammad. So when you listen to like John Adams, right, about the second, he was the second president of the United States,
right,
after Washington.
Didn't he refer to them as like Muslim or something?
Mohammedans, yeah, those of Muhammad, yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, that was the 18th century description of these people, those who followed Muhammad. And by that time, you had Muslim pirates, trying to. Anyway, they were interfering with our trade routes.
Yeah, Tripoli and everything. Yeah.
Yep, Tripoli. Yeah. So you've got that. You've got the Treaty of Tripoli, where John Adams is trying to, placate these people, saying, "Hey, we're not a Christian nation. We're nothing to worry about." So
yeah.
So going back to Islam, you have Christian influences, definitely, but you also have a lot of Judaism influences.
Right. I'm not sure if the ties to Judaism come straight from Judaism to Islam, or if it's like funneled through Christianity, so to speak. Therein lies kind of the issue, because, for instance, and this kind of ties in with what we've done already, like on the New Testament. You have people saying, "Oh, well, the Synoptic Gospels means that it was these Gospels are using Mark," and fair enough. That's the prevailing theory, is that Mark was the first Gospel, and then Matthew and Luke used Mark in their writings. And what we're seeing is that there are a lot of reasons within data science to show that the first gospel actually wasn't a version of Mark per se, but it was actually the gospel that was produced and published by Marcion, which is called Evangelion in 144. But Marcion's name would have been pronounced Markion back in the Roman Empire, which means little Mark. And the Gospel of Mark, from what we understand, is more or less kind of almost like a weird version of Marcion's Gospel. So, in a similar sense, I'm not sure if they take from Mark or if they take from Mark through Evangelion, if that makes sense. So, it's kind of like Islam. I'm not sure if they take from Judaism or if they take from Judaism through Christianity. It's when everything is so closely tied together, it's tough.
What was the heaviest influence, do you think?
For Islam?
Sure. Yeah.
So far, what it's seeming is more or less like one could say Judaism, but I think it was actually Judaism through Christianity. Because by the time that Islam starts, the Christianity in specific had been around for hundreds of years, and it was very heavily Judaized. So, like, if you were to ask somebody within Christianity, "Hey, what are the origins of your faith?" they would go through the Old Testament. They would go through the Torah. They'd go through the Tanakh. They'd talk about these Old Testament figures, Abraham and Moses and Joseph and Isaac and all these different figures. So, I mean, if Islam is an offshoot of Christianity, then it's going to have those things in it. I mean, it just would. Maybe if it was closer in time to the start of Christianity, it wouldn't be as Jewish by that point. But I think just the timing of it allows for it to kind of be both through Christianity.
Okay. Now, are there any scholars that talk about the Quran? Is there any scholarship whatsoever that they broach the subject of multiple authorship for the Quran?
Yeah, I think so. There's been some talk on it. It's just, for the most part, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if there's really been too terribly much scholarship that's really talked about that particular issue. Mostly because number one, scholarship is very slow to really adjust to anything or progress. Like, it just is. Because within scholarship, people say, okay, I've got a hypothesis. I'm going to test it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it out there for peer review and everything. And I'm not even going to really promote it or anything like that until it's done with peer review. Peer review takes a long time. But ultimately, a study has shown that after peer review, most articles only get only get read about 2 or 3 times post peer review. So realistically, no one's really reading these things anyways, especially since journals keep everything behind paywalls. And for the most part, if someone's reading it, it's probably not just some layperson. It's probably another scholar. So it takes forever for these things to really catch on. Your best bet is to have somebody write a textbook for college or something with your information in there, and then it sprinkles and trickles down from there. So that's why that, and the fact that Matthew and I are not necessarily scholars per se, that is why we've chosen to write a book about what we write, because, you know, it's a faster way to get information out there. And ultimately, if scholars want to talk to us, which they very clearly have, they'll reach out to us and we'll do interviews like this and we'll talk to them. So yeah.
How many scholars have you been able to talk to so far?
So scholars, like in private conversations, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think 6 different scholars. 4 of which are published, and 4 of which, not necessarily the same 4, but 4 of which are active like professors, like teachers in colleges.
And what do they think of? Well, I should ask, what were the talks about?
Just about our findings and whatnot,
okay.
presenting what we're looking at. But ultimately, to answer your overall question here on Islam, I would say that one of the problems with scholarship, and even tying back into our book Christ Before Jesus, this, about the New Testament, is that it's only been here recently that the creators of the program that we use to run the stylometric analysis, it's only been within the last couple years that they actually have come out and said, hey, it works with the same amount of accuracy level with smaller amounts of text. And what that means is that the number that they gave was roughly the same size as the average chapter of the New Testament. So in other words, they're saying you could use it for the New Testament by breaking it up into chapters, which is what we do. Prior to us, scholars have run the stylometric analysis on the New Testament. They've run it on the Quran, but they can't break it up small enough because there's no proof that it works that way. I mean, they could break it up, but no one would accept it within scholarship because scholars haven't said it works at this amount of data. But here recently, they have said it. So it makes our work able to be done and able to actually be scientific and peer-reviewed, more or less, or able to be accurate, so to speak, and able for us to point to something and say, no, look, we are actually within the bounds of accuracy. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say that would probably make your work cutting edge, dare I say?
More or less.
Because no one else is really doing it.
No one else has done it to the scope and scale that we've done it. It's just, it hasn't been done. People have run it. People have run the analysis before, but what they'll do is they'll look at the entire book. Like they'll say the Gospel of Luke, and they'll say, let's run it as one big book. And if you run it as one big book, it thinks it's one author and it'll put it wherever it needs to be on the results. But if you chop it up into chapters, you'll see it's actually two authors, very clearly two authors, in which case that's a problem. But you're never going to see it if you don't chop it up. And you're never going to chop it up if you don't know you can. And that's the thing. And here recently, the scholars that created the software said it works at that level. It works at that small amount of data.
Now, did you chop it up to the canonized version of chapters, or how did you chop it up?
So chapters was the primary thing, the primary method. I will say, however, that there were some times, especially with smaller chapters, that we tended to lump some things together. So, I mean, could it be that there were certain sections in specific that we missed where that could have been from another author? Yeah. But the fact that it's already like a book is from 2 or 3 or 4, maybe even 5 different authors, it's already bad.
Yeah,
I mean, if anything, we did it in a way that would stop us from finding additional authors, which would be even worse. So, yeah, I mean, by and large, it shouldn't, like, for instance, my example of Gospel of Luke, it shouldn't come up as 2 different authors. Even if you chop it up to chapters, it should come up as one author if Luke wrote it. But he didn't.
Wow. And so what's amazing, I'm surprised that there aren't more authors to the book of Luke.
Well, to be fair, there's technically in Luke, there's technically 3. Technically.
Okay.
It's just
2
that
for sure, 3 maybe.
Well, no, there's absolutely 3. It's just I don't consider the third one really because so the Gospel of Mark, it's earlier than like Matthew and Luke and John, but it includes, there's one chapter in there called it's chapter 13, and lots of times they call it the Olivet Discourse. Sometimes it's referred to as the mini apocalypse. It's the chapter where Jesus says, here in 40 years or here before long, there's not going to be any stone left unturned here in the temple. It's going to be destroyed.
Yeah, the destruction of the temple. Foreshadowing.
That chapter is not in the original version of Mark. It's not. It's 100% another author. But it finds its way not only into Mark, but Matthew and Luke. So whoever wrote that is not the same person. It's not Marcion, or at least it's not the same person who wrote Evangeline. It's not the same person who wrote Mark, Matthew, or Luke. It's someone else. Someone completely different. So because Luke has a chapter like that, I think it's Luke. I want to say it's Luke 16. Is that what I'm thinking it is? It might be later. But anyway, it might be Luke 18. I'm not sure. The point is that corresponding chapter is technically another author, but we never really, because we knew that author was so different, we tended to run the books without that because we already knew that was a different author.
Huh.
Yeah.
I'm pulling up Bible Gateway here. Continue.
So what?
Yeah, I'm just pulling up Bible Gateway just to have it prepped in case we needed to.
Oh yeah.
Get to a specific. So I'm reading out of the ESV. Luke 18 is the parable of the persistent widow.
No, that's not it. I apologize.
No, that's okay.
Later in Luke here.
Yeah, he foretells his death a 3rd time. Blind beggar. Huh. Wonder where that is. You say it's the Olivet Discourse?
Yes, it's the Olivet Discourse. That's generally what it's referred to as.
Let's see if it'll pull it up. Let's see. Olivet Discourse. That's going to be in Luke 21.
Luke 21. Okay. Yeah, like I said, it's later in the book. But yeah, Luke 21 in specific. Yep. Nice. So that is something that is from a different author than Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. Well, it's not in John, but Matthew, Mark, Luke, and also Evangelion. It's a different author from all of those. And interestingly enough, that chapter is really the only chapter that people use, scholars have used, to date Mark. When they take a look at Mark, they go, oh, we think it's around 70. And the reason for it is because there's a chapter about the destruction of the temple. So therefore, it needs to be around the destruction of the temple, which happened in 70. But unfortunately, that wasn't in the original version. So no, you can't. I mean, all that it really means is that it has to happen at least in 70 or beyond. It could happen later than 70, but ultimately it wasn't even in there. So it throws everything up into the air. And realistically, we believe that it's actually about the Bar Kokhba revolt, which happened in like the 132, ends in 136. And the reason we think this is because if you look at just kind of turning to the original version, which is in Mark 13. I've got the King James version, so I apologize.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
But in Mark 13, it talks about wars, rumors of wars, that kind of thing, talks about the destruction of the temple. However, we believe that is merely just a backdrop for this particular story. Just kind of, it's a trope that happened within ancient times, is they would tell a story, one particular story, but they would put it in like a older setting, so to speak. But that being said, what it mentions the abomination of desolation. That is in Mark 13, verse 14. And it says, this is in King James Version, but when ye shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, standing where it ought not. And then it says, well, at least in English it has parentheses, let him that readeth understand. Then let them that be in Judea flee to the mountains. So in other words, it literally says, hey, we are speaking in code here. Like we're trying to, it literally says, let the reader understand. Like you're going to have to dig and try to get this.
Let him that hath understanding discern the number of the beast.
Well,
sound familiar?
It does. And for a good reason. But nevertheless, the abomination of desolation is only mentioned one other time in the Bible, and that is in Daniel. And it talks about a statue that was put up on the Temple Mount after the destruction of the first temple. So the temple in specific gets destroyed in 70. The second temple gets destroyed in 70. But there's not really anything that really makes sense as the abomination of desolation as that kind of connection. However, at the end of the Bar Kokhba revolt, Emperor Hadrian put a statue of himself on the Temple Mount. Jerome in specific, writing later, obviously Christian leader writing later in the 4th century, he made that connection and said, that's what that is. It's about after the Bar Kokhba revolt. That's what it's talking about. Not only that, but if it meant something in 70, then they wouldn't need to flee Judea. They would just maybe need to flee Jerusalem, because it was a siege of Jerusalem. Judea was still a place. But after the Bar Kokhba revolt, Hadrian laid waste to Judea. And that was the diaspora of the Jews into the surrounding areas. So if it's saying flee into the mountains, flee out of Judea, it's not talking about 70. It's definitely, as Jerome pointed out correctly, it's talking about 136. So that little chapter, that extra chapter or whatever that got added, the way that anybody ever dates Mark at all was definitely post 136. Definitely.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So,
that makes sense.
Yeah.
That is wild. It's like you know how the Apostle Paul, I'm going off on a tangent, but it's connected.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
Apostle,
go ahead. Yeah.
the Apostle Paul talks about the end of things, the end of days. There's
Mhm.
no reason to get married. There's no reason to do this or that because the end is near. But
Right.
if you have to, here's some guidelines. Um,
Yeah.
I wonder if all of these mistakes within the text, they didn't bother fixing them. They didn't bother cleaning it up because they thought, well, this is the end.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
input Jim Morrison in the Doors music. This is the end. I mean, this is it. This is it. I mean, Jesus is going to come. The second coming. The world is going to end. It doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Could
For the most part, go ahead. Sorry.
No. I was going to say, could it be possible that the reason for all of these mistakes and the reason why Christians are scrambling to make sense through apologetics and trying to say, well, this is this and this and this, and this explains that, is because the world technically was supposed to have been ended by this time.
Right. And I would agree with you. To the Jews in specific who are heavily putting their input into Christianity post 136 after they've left Judea and they've gone into the surrounding areas and they run into this mystery cult up in Asia Minor, which is just right up the road from them. And they're going, whoa, you guys have a story about Jesus with a backdrop of Judea? Okay, yeah. Well, here, let's make him super Jewish because we could help you. We could help you more or less make him more historical. Let's give him a genealogy. Let's give him a birth story. Let's give him a temple coronation where he goes to the temple to be sanctified and everything. Like let's do all of that. And ultimately, these people had just come off the heels, like I said, of the Bar Kokhba revolt. To them, everything is awful. No, the world is ending. And that's just kind of how it goes. I mean, that's the grim reality of what these people were experiencing then. Maybe they found hope within this new religion and stuff like that, and trying to bring in their expertise and their knowledge of how to add to stories and stuff like that, and combining everything. Maybe they saw hope and new life in this, and more power to them. I was reading just yesterday about a text. It was a certain letter that was found in a cave near where they found the Dead Sea Scrolls. And this letter in specific was talking about all these different things that this woman who had already lost her husband and everything like that. So she was this old widow, and she was hiding in a cave during the diaspora, more or less. And she was writing about all these different things that she would like for if someone could water her plants at home, because she has these groves. If someone can water her plants, that would be something that she would appreciate. That's basically what this letter said. And we found the letter, and it's sealed away, so no one ever got it. But then shortly, right past where the letter was, is all these human remains. So this poor lady was running. This poor lady and the people who were with her, they perished in a cave. Because, this was the grim reality of what was going on. It was a hellscape for these people. And I think the point I'm trying to get to is that we see the heavy influence of Jewish belief and Jewish tradition, Jewish religion on Christianity at a certain point. And I think ultimately that was their way of finding preservation of their beliefs, was to add it to this new mystery cult and try their best at pretty much starting over. So a little bit too much history there, but nevertheless, something that I was reading here recently.
That's all right. That is interesting. how things have just gotten embellished over time. We have been covering your book. We've been reading your book chapter by chapter throughout the show. Yeah. So since the time of our first interview, we've been reading a chapter. We're still stuck in chapter 4. It is a very dense chapter. It has taken us 3 weeks, and we're almost towards the end of the chapter. In this chapter
4. Oh, man.
Chapter, it talks a lot about the Apostle Paul.
Yes.
Possibly being a figure that may have existed during the time of Josephus, maybe even before.
Well, we postulate that if there was a Paul, according to the stuff that's in the Pauline epistles, he could have been in the 1st century BCE, which would be well before Josephus. We're talking
you're right.
even before Jesus would have supposedly lived.
Yeah, and then possibly using some of the tropes of this Pauline figure, adding some Christianized verbiage. And so you postulate, okay, so if he existed, it was most likely 1st century BCE, or he was invented by Marcion.
In the second. Yeah. Either it was some kind of hangover from the 1st century BCE somehow, or it was all 2nd century stuff where they were just taking wild guesses at trying to place him in time and missing awfully.
Yes.
And we tend to lean on that side. But I mean, all we're ultimately saying is that it's definitely not in the 1st century.
Right.
Not CE.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, Paul seems to be too big of a figure to have been told. For me, it seems like he's too big of a figure to have been invented. But then again, why would that be a problem? I still find myself contradicting myself.
Right.
Have you read this book by N.T. Wright?
So Matthew has that book. I wish he was here, but yes, Matthew definitely has that book and has read it. Definitely, yes.
Now, N.T. Wright, the way he treats Paul is straight from the scripture. He takes the letters of Paul as writ, although he is intellectually honest where he says some of the, like you've mentioned, some of the Pauline letters have been proven to have been, as Bart Ehrman would say, forged. Basically, a writer would use a well-known name and write in the name of, so that way it carried weight. It carried some authority. Mm-hmm. So I guess my question would be, why would he use Paul? Why not himself?
Yeah. So there is a big question of, if Paul is faked, why is he faked? Like, who would believe Paul? Like, who would believe in Paul if he's not from somewhere else? I don't know if the last time I was on, did I explain that we had spoken to Dr. Nina Livesey from University of Oklahoma?
Let me see. I've got my notes here. Let's see, Bart Ehrman. If you mentioned it, I don't have it. Oh, Nina Livesey.
Yes.
The fall book release.
Yes.
So she's going to be writing a book in the fall.
Yeah. So she is a scholar that's got a book coming out on Paul and why he was absolutely just made up in the 2nd century. And she does not use stellometry or anything like that. She doesn't use what we use. What she looks at is she just looks at it from a rhetoric standpoint. So she's very familiar with text and everything. Yeah.
Do you have the title of the book?
I do not. I don't think, when we spoke with her, she did not have a title of the book quite yet.
Gotcha.
Because it was in formatting with the publisher, and I'm sure that they may have some questions on, or some feedback on the title of the book or something. Now I can share that with you guys absolutely once we get the title.
Last name Livesey.
SEY.
SEY.
Yeah. Nina Livesey, Dr. Nina Livesey. And she was a joy to talk to. She was really kind of confused as to, because she didn't really know what stylometry was, but she was confused as to how Matthew and I, non-scholars who weren't, spending our entire lives looking at this stuff, how we came to the conclusion so easily and quickly and effectively. And she was just shocked. And she was like, wow, okay, well, tell me about what this is. And we kind of went back and forth, and we agreed with a ton of different things. But that being said, she had asked us, she said, is there a chance that any part of the book of Acts was possibly written by another author? And we looked at the data and we looked at the results, and we're like, not really. It looks like it's all one person. And she said, I believe, and this was her words, I'm paraphrasing to some extent, but she said, I believe that there was a book, like a sort of like Acts, that established this character, Paul. And then the letters were kind of just letters that people made up that this person in specific wrote,
based on the information that they had,
or based off of a book that established who the character was.
Yeah.
So the character could be 100% fabricated, and everybody, for the most part, could pretty much just accept that. But this is letters. These are letters that are coming from this fictional character. Something that the Greeks did, and I think I shared this last time, but something that the Greeks did in order to learn how to write in school was they were given assignments of write a letter from the perspective of a fictional character. So we have letters from Hercules, his wife, forest nymphs. We have all kinds of letters. So it's possible that there was something in specific that was written about Paul that established who the character was, and then there were these fake letters that were attributed to him. And we kind of see a little bit of potential for earlier writing, like around the time of Marcion, for a book called Acts of Paul and Thecla. And you can read about it. Let me see here. I've actually got, as much as I love to talk smack about him, but Bart Ehrman, his book Lost Scriptures, there's a particular there's a particular book that he talks about. He gives, it's just a whole rundown of books that basically did not make it into the Bible. And there is, as luck would have it, there's Acts of Paul and there's Acts of Thecla. And so I think Acts of Paul in specific may have been an early text that established who Paul was, and then the Marcion letters were just fake letters that came out about that. So again, Acts of Paul does not give any identifying information of Jesus or anything like that. It seems very, very second century fabrication as well. But it does, from our stylometric analysis, it does show that there's a chance that it could have been included in that collection from the Marcionites, that they had this character Paul and they had letters from this Paul. But I mean, even Tertullian, the Christian church father writing in 200, he said, I have to take it by faith that Paul even existed, because I think that it's possible that Marcion invented Paul. But he says the reason he takes it on faith that Paul existed is because he said, Tertullian said, I have my own version of Paul's letters.
That's nice.
So in other words, Tertullian says, hey, look, we have some edited versions of these particular books, and that's why we believe Paul. But other than that, can't trust him as far as you can throw him. So even in the second century, or even the early church fathers, we're not all on the same page about Paul. I mean, Paul was more or less, he was the apostle to the heretics. That was what he was considered. So he was popular. So you try your hardest to try to bring him back into Christianity. Otherwise, he's some heretic Marcionite belief.
Yeah, and also the character Paul. I mean, how close does he resemble Marcion? So, for instance,
pretty close.
Yeah, because the character Paul, he's extremely jealous, petty as all hell. He would literally have people thrown out of churches if they dared to question him, present anything other than what he's. In fact, he even wrote it in plain. Well, it's written that Paul said, "Do not receive anything other than what you have received from us." And he also talks about Jews who are of the synagogue of Satan, have them cast out of the church, don't have anything to do with them. And basically they are they claim they are Jews, but are not. So evidently he's beefing with some other factions, whether it's the New Testament, whether it's the Jerusalem church, which doesn't sound like it. I mean, the Jerusalem church is probably featured more so in the book of Acts than anything else.
Right.
When he talks about meeting with the apostles with a gift and trying to get concessions from them, and they basically told him, okay, we'll accept your version of Christianity just so long as you don't eat anything sacrificed to idols, you don't something. I mean, they had like maybe 3 stipulations, and then Paul went yes, and then goes over to his churches and said, okay guys, listen, bring it in. All right, listen, we know there are no other gods. If you so happen to eat anything sacrificed to idols, don't worry, but do not offend your weaker brother in the faith by offering him meat sacrificed to idols. Don't do that. So what he did, the way N.T. Wright was crafting it was he got concessions from the Jerusalem church, went a mile with it, and basically said, okay, we're good to go, and then lowered the bar to enter into Christianity. I mean, you could literally trip over it and end up in Christianity and be considered a Christian, because he made the character Paul made Christianity accessible. But if you leave Christianity, that bar goes way up and says, you were never of us. If you were a true Christian, would never leave the Christian faith.
Right.
Anyway, and then the character, whoever wrote 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, closer to Revelation, whoever that was, that would be an interesting study to know who the authorship is on those. Basically,
so you said 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John?
Yep. The last 3 epistles before you hit Revelation. Yeah.
So 1st John is the same author as the Gospel of John.
Okay.
2nd and 3rd, completely different. Revelation, completely different.
Okay.
Revelation, right. I don't know if we got into that last time.
No, we didn't. I mean, that was going to be I knew that was going to be a long conversation, and I'm up for it. Longer the better.
Well,
whatever you're comfortable with.
It's actually not as long as you might think. Yeah, which unfortunately I've had to say before in my life. So, point is, Revelation in specific is an interesting text because the bulk of it actually comes up with the Septuagint. And the closest book in the Septuagint that it comes up with is not Daniel, Isaiah, or Ezekiel, or anything like prophetic or apocalyptic or anything. It's Psalms and Genesis. And you go, what? What's going on here? Why is it doing that? And every time we ran it, Septuagint. And we're like, what? Why is it doing that? The first 3 chapters, yet again, the first 3 chapters, 2nd century. The last chapter, 1 or 2 chapters, 2nd century. The bulk of it, Septuagint. And that's when we realized, oh, that's because if you have something in Hebrew first and it gets translated into Greek, then it's going to have certain words and phraseology that's going to appear weird. It's going to act differently. So the results basically say Revelation was written in Hebrew and translated into Greek, and it's the only book in the New Testament that does that. So what that tells us is that starting in like chapter 4 or so, all the way through like 20 or something, is that is the it's like Jewish apocalyptic literature that got stolen more or less by the Christians later on and adapted for their own use. And you can tell that there wasn't a lot about Jesus, because in the first 3 chapters, there's stuff about John, there's stuff about different churches, there's stuff about Jesus Christ. In the last chapter, in the last 1 or 2 chapters, it's John and Jesus Christ and different churches and blah, blah, blah. But in the bulk of it, there's no more John. There's no more John. He doesn't say, I am John anymore. He doesn't say that. He doesn't talk about other churches. In the bulk of it, if Jesus gets mentioned, it's almost like it's tacked on. It says God and his son Jesus. God and his son Jesus. You don't have Jesus by himself, named by himself at least. You have someone returning and being the Prince of Peace. Not said that his name is Jesus, not by himself. He's tacked on. It's very clearly something that was not written by Christians and then eventually adapted by Christians, and they just added in Jesus whenever they could. But it's right after Jesus is mentioned, it says God and his son Jesus. God and his son Jesus. But Jesus is mentioned by himself in the first 3 chapters, and he's mentioned by himself in the last 2 chapters. So the chapters that we see were originally in Greek and were in the 2nd century. Those are the parts where those are the parts where it's almost like a separation. So we come to the conclusion that it's easy to steal something like Luke stole from Marcion. The easiest way to steal is to add something to the beginning and add something to the end. That's the easiest way to take it. Because if you want to write a huge passage in the middle, you got to find a good place to work it in. Mm-hmm. But if you're just putting something at the beginning and the end and taking it, you can do that.
Wow. So, and I know, have we discussed the authorship of Revelation?
So like the timing of it, at least?
Timing, who may have had their hands in it.
So if it is Hebrew, like we're finding, then I would say that it's probably something to do with Nero, or I'm I would imagine it's probably something with Nero. I'd imagine that it's probably something anywhere from 70 to 90 or so is probably when it was written. Believe it or not, the dating of Revelation we agree with for the most part. We just don't think that it was initially Christian, and then the Christians took it in the 2nd century. It was just initially like Hebrew is written by Jews or whatever, and then they just ended up taking it later and adding Jesus to it and adding John to the beginning and the end.
Are you saying that Revelation we're just going to keep the title Revelation. Are you saying that it started out in Hebrew?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because that's why it comes up with the Septuagint. Because the Septuagint was Hebrew and it goes into Greek. And that's what the analysis was saying, was that it's behaving like the Septuagint.
Because the way it's translated, certain words will indicate, this is translating from this original.
Yes.
And
yes.
If it were translated, say, from, well, that wouldn't make sense. I was going to say from Latin to Greek.
It would have behaved. It would have behaved differently then, I'm sure. But it would have kicked it way out. It would have been something that's not even close to anything else. But yeah, it was. So we don't know who wrote it, but every once in a while you might catch me saying that virtually all of the New Testament was in the 2nd century, and that's because I'm making a small caveat for the Hebrew version of the bulk of Revelation, which was, again, not Christian, but was written probably in the end of the 1st century, probably. But what they ended up doing was they ended up just taking it and just adding some Jesus to it, adding John to it, and just kind of running with it. It was probably something that was fairly popular, so they just kind of used it. I mean, it makes sense. If you've got something that's written in the end of 1st century and the Jews had it, then they'll probably bring it with them or have it in some way, shape, or form whenever they blend with the Christians later, post-diaspora. And so it just pops up again.
But we don't have the original Hebrew.
No, we don't have the original Hebrew for it. Interestingly enough, it was never claimed to be written in Hebrew. See, what's weird is that the only time that anybody says, any of the church fathers say that some of it was written in Hebrew, was they claim that Matthew wrote in Hebrew. That's not even close to accurate. Right. But just say Revelation was written in Hebrew, bro. Like, just say it. We'll believe you now. we have proof of it, but they never did. They never said Revelation was written in Hebrew first. They just...
Yeah, they couldn't bring themselves to admit that because interesting enough, Revelation almost didn't make it into the canonized version that we have today.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, there was a lot of squabbling back and forth as to what to actually include anyway.
What do we do with this? I mean, it's like a hodgepodge of weirdness and...
Right. But it does seem to be ascribed to a John of Patmos. Some people have asked me, if I believe that John was a real person. And I would say, this is just personal opinion. I would say yes. I believe that John was a real person, not an apostle. That doesn't make any sense. I don't think that Jesus existed, so there's not apostles or disciples. But I would say that John was probably someone who was pretty influential in the evolution of Christianity. And I would even say that John was probably someone who knew Marcion. And Marcion in specific just added him into the gospel because, he was more or less like a cameo, so to speak. And I would think that the John from Patmos is actually the real John, that they're saying, oh, John from Patmos wrote this book or whatever, and they ascribed it to this real John. Was he an actual disciple? No, but I think he was a real guy.
No, but even in the Gospels, he's featured heavily. The apostle whom Jesus loved. I mean, he's one of the more famous apostles, and Paul tries to whoever's making Paul's letters, they try to one up him by saying, he's the latest, the greatest. He's like the it's like the Quran, the last revelation of God.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We're trying to one up everybody. But John is like, there's a verse that says, John shall tarry till I come back. He will not taste death. And so they're trying to say that his Isle of Patmos experience with Revelation and whatnot, that this is the fulfilling of that prophecy, that he will not taste death until I come.
Yeah.
Which is strange because it's like, well, wait a minute. When Jesus comes back again, he's supposed to set all things correct. He's supposed to take over everything, make an end of things. The sun, at the end of everything, sun, moon, and stars will be added to the lake of fire, and I will create a new heaven and a new earth, that sort of thing. But John the Apostle is considered one of the rock stars of the 12 apostles. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. I mean, realistically, anybody in that inner circle, Peter, James, and John, I would say personally that I think there was probably a real Peter, a real James, and a real John. I just think that they were probably just people who were influential in the beginning of Christianity. That's what my guess is. Otherwise, I'm not really sure why they get brought up. It's entirely possible that they're entirely fabricated, especially considering the fact that you have Peter, who's said to his original name was Simon, and Simon, James, and John were all names of generals in the Bar Kokhba revolt.
Say that
they
again.
were, yeah. Also, there's a John and there's a John and a Simon, who they are mentioned in Wars of the Jews alongside Josephus as generals in the First Jewish-Roman War. In fact, near the end of Wars of the Jews, like after the destruction of the temple, Josephus says that Simon in specific put on different clothes, and he tried to act as if he wasn't actually he denied who he was, more or less, when people are like, hey, aren't you one of the generals or something? And he's like, no, I'm not actually with them. But then he got arrested.
Oh, that doesn't sound familiar at all. Not at all.
Yeah, no idea. No idea how somebody originally named Simon would be doing something like that. My guess is that Peter actually existed, but they changed his name to Simon in that story so that they could use that little Josephus.
That little nugget.
Yeah. I mean, but again, Josephus is writing at the end of the 1st century. So all of this is still 2nd century stuff. I mean, if you've been reading along with the book, you'll see, I'm sure we've already mentioned in there, there's a crucifixion scene in Josephus's, in the life of Josephus. In his autobiography, he writes about how he saw 3 men crucified, and he goes to the Roman leader in charge and says, can I take down the bodies? And he gets permission. 2 of them die and 1 of them survives. Great, cool. So Josephus, whose Aramaic name was Joseph, just like Joseph of Arimathea,
yeah,
goes and gets approval from the Roman leader in charge. 2 men die, 1 survives. And Joseph of Arimathea, they have no idea where Arimathea is because it's a made-up town, because it's not a thing. But Josephus's Aramaic name or Hebrew name would have been Joseph Bar Matthias, which is, Joseph Bar Matthias, which is Joseph, son of Matthias. So it's like, okay, well, this is very obviously just taken from Josephus. Like, I mean,
yeah,
they give him a cameo.
A little too on the nose.
Yeah, but it's and so in reality, a lot of people actually see that and they assume that Josephus somehow made up the New Testament. It's not the case. We don't see any evidence of that whatsoever. In fact, there's a ton of evidence against it. But
just look at his style. If we should bring in stylometric.
Yeah.
Just looking at his style of writing, it's very scholarly.
Yeah.
Nothing like the Gospels. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah. At best, the person who was writing the Gospels either heard the stories from Josephus or maybe had a copy of Josephus somewhere nearby, because it's not direct copies of it. Definitely not. But it's definitely like, hey, I'm using some kind of story that I heard somewhere. Yeah, and, I mean, that's just kind of how it goes. That's how the evolution of religion works.
Yep. Wow.
But I think at the end of the day, as eye-opening as a lot of the things that we've found actually are, it really, to me, it's really fun to see how just boring it is. Like, or how rudimentary or how just normal everything. Because when I was raised as a Christian, I kind of viewed these people as these like enlightened people, receiving the word of God, and then as I left the church, but then I still, assumed that Jesus was real and that the stories, for the most part, had some kind of historical value. I assumed that these people were at least like enlightened people who, maybe just believed something or exaggerated a story or something. But the more that I look into it, I'm like, no, these are just completely normal dudes who are just coming up with stuff and just using tropes that have been around forever. As I watch here in America, my entire country just completely just disintegrate in front of my eyes.
Right.
I can't help but wonder, there's a lot of crazy people who will absolutely throw their entire lives behind even crazier people. And it's not really that far-fetched that Christians in the 2nd century, when there was nothing really more fun to do than just, be afraid of the sun or something. And, of course you're going to believe somebody who comes around and says, hey, did you hear about some guy who walked on water? He did, of course.
Well, and then as the church progresses, and who knows how many times, if you were to look at what the church had in the 1500s, compare it to what they had in the 2nd and 1st century, I think they're going to be quite different. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, with all of the editing, with all of the sanitization, cleaning up the text, who knows what these church fathers did with the texts as they went along, and what their pupils and their pupils and their pupils did. I mean, if we had originals, we would be looking at a total different Christianity.
It's possible. It's definitely possible. I think it would be beneficial to have originals of Marcion's works or whatever he put out in the New Testament, because I believe that was pretty much the first time that the vast majority of Christians saw any kind of text. And as a result, we do have we do have reconstructions of his works, and I think that they're pretty close. They're pretty good. However, I think if we just knew exactly, we knew for a fact that this is what Marcion put out, we would see Christianity as it truly was in its earliest stages, as some mystery cult that was very clearly borrowing different things from different belief systems and other cults and religions at the time, and stories from Josephus. It's really not that hard. And church fathers were very quick to point it out. Justin Martyr said, hey, we got, or he didn't say we got it from this, but Justin Martyr said the Lord's Supper has been going on since before Jesus even supposedly existed. He said that.
Really?
Justin Martyr admitted that people ate bread in resemblance of flesh and drank wine to symbolize blood well before Jesus even walked the earth. He admits to that. He just says that it was Satan mimicking Jesus before Jesus.
Okay. Poisoning the well before a chance to drink from it. Okay.
Absolutely. But it's like, no, not at all. You just took it. Like And I mean, look at the Bible itself. There's literal times in the Bible where it says, "Keep the mysteries of the faith close to your heart. Keep it away," more or less. Jesus himself says, "I speak in parables so that I can confuse people." It's very clearly a mystery thing where you would go through certain rituals like the Lord's Supper, baptism, cleansing, that kind of thing, ritualistic cleansing, in order to be initiated into the cult. And then you'd slowly start to gain information and everything like that. That's just how it works. There's a ton of those at the time. It's how they operated. Christianity just ended up being the biggest one.
Right. It's like the history of Israel and the ancient Israelites, where their belief system goes from a polytheistic pantheon of gods to the point where it goes from that to monotheism.
Right.
It's just the biggest one out. It's
Yeah.
the same exact thing.
And it makes a quick pit stop through henotheism, the idea that there are other gods, but you choose one particular one, where like it's the god of your nation, but you acknowledge that there are other gods, which is why you have God say, "You shall have no other gods before me." I thought there weren't any others. You know, like of course, they acknowledged others. They just didn't think that they were as powerful as Yahweh. But eventually it became, like you said, monotheism, where they almost were just like, okay, let's go ahead and just scrap these other gods and just say that it's our God. And it's around that time that you end up getting the concept of Satan as well, because all of a sudden it's no longer your God versus all these other gods. What it is there's only one God, and anything else that's bad is just attributed to Satan. It eventually just kind of morphs into this weird monotheism. It's silly, but again, it's just, that's how evolution works. That's how evolution of thought works. It's how evolution of religions work. And I think there's nothing really special about it, except for the fact that it just lasted, but something had to have lasted, something had to. That's how it works.
Yeah, and it also makes me wonder what is going to happen to Christianity in the coming generation. So you've got all of these, like you alluded to, watching your country literally implode in on itself. You've got all these Christians writing crazy. I mean, literal crazy shit. And how much of that is going to last and get introduced into other modes of thought and then sanitized to the point where, well, I think it would be harder to do this in this day and age because we have audio format, we've got video format. So it's going to be a little hard. I mean, it's still possible. You can take something from 100 years ago and incorporate it into your own. And all it takes is for people to, all it takes is a memory hole, where people, they remember the name, they just don't remember everything they said, and they're listening and looking to other people speaking in the here and the now, using their thoughts that they came up with a century prior, and just reincorporating it into today's world, trying to make it relevant.
As far as Christianity goes, just be honest, and this is of course speculation, obviously I'm not a seer or fortune teller, but I would say that we are living right now in the final death throes of Christianity. And I say that because this giant wave that we have felt here in America is something that you would expect is just like, it's like the dying sun just exploding, more or less. Like it's the last final punches, so to speak, of a fighter going down, because Christianity is realizing as a whole that it is losing its grip on America. It just is. So as a result, they're trying anything and everything to remain relevant and remain in power. And I think, in all honesty, there is technically going to be a period of time that we have to go through where it will absolutely feel like it's strangling us. Absolutely.
Oh, you mean like
we see it in Louisiana, we see it in Oklahoma already, where they're saying, oh, the 10 Commandments need to be in church. Oh, and you have to preach from the Bible and stuff like that. And it's like, that's batshit insane. But I will say that it's not going to last forever. Either A, it's going to get struck down and it's never going to take hold, or it's going to take hold and people are going to realize how shitty that actually is. And then there's going to be a huge final surge that just completely wipes it out. because there is no way, shape, or form that forcing your religion as you are dying out and you are losing your congregations, there is no way that doing this is going to somehow make people go, you know what I need to do? Go to church. Like, that just doesn't make any sense. And even scholars, like I saw Dan McClellan talking very, very the point, and saying, no, that is bad. Do not do that.
Yeah, I mean, with what the red states are doing, they're just making life so miserable. You could almost compare it to the tribulation. It's like they're putting us through the tribulation, like in Revelation. It's like prices are going to go up because of all of the shitty decisions that we're making, literally harming our economy. We're so dependent on oil that, all the Saudis have to do is raise their prices, and then gas goes from 3.5 a gallon all the way to $5 to $6 a gallon. You've got corporations through greedflation literally raising the prices of their stuff and then blaming it on the pandemic. It's like, it's amazing. And then this forced adherence to biblical theology, cherry picked, of course, stripping autonomy away from women, forcing them to give birth to non-viable pregnancies to the point where now the death rate of infants is going up in Texas, going up in Louisiana, going up in Ohio and Iowa, and all these places that have these restrictive laws. And then you've got Project 2025. I don't know if you've looked into that. It is the right-wing fundamentalist Christian nationalist Trump cult literally forcing us to live through a theocracy.
Theocracy / just straight, which is realistically just a dictatorship.
Yep.
I mean, to be fair, a theocracy is not really there's no such thing as a theocracy. It's just a dictatorship where someone says, I speak for God.
Exactly. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. And I mean, if you want, everyone kept talking. I just remember back in the early 2000s, they were warning us about the Muslim takeover of our country. And, we've got a Muslim in chief now president. And, it's going to be so bad. If you want to know what it's like to be under that kind of an oppressive regime, look no further than your red states. That is part and parcel. That is literally the best example of what a theocratic dictatorship looks like. And it's only going to get worse. And if we allow these fundamentalist rejects to take over. And I do appreciate people like Dan McClellan. When I first got his podcast, Dogma Over Debate or something like that.
Data Over Dogma.
Data Over Dogma. Yes, I listened to his podcast biweekly, and it kind of struck me weird. It's like, why is this guy a Christian? He understands.
A Mormon, nonetheless.
Oh, is he a Mormon? I did not know that.
Yeah. Which doesn't make, to be fair, that's kind of why. Because the Mormons believe that the Book of Mormon is the truest book in the world and in history. And that Joseph Smith said that the Bible contains errors. So while, yes, he does technically say that he's a Christian, he's a Mormon. So therefore, he's perfectly fine with the Bible having errors.
Okay. That makes more sense now, because the Bible can have errors, but as long as the Book of Mormon is A-okay, we're okay.
Yeah.
Wow. But I mean, this guy is incredibly intelligent, very well read. I guess that goes to show you that it doesn't matter how intelligent you are.
It doesn't matter how intelligent or how studied or learned you are. You can still go in on Sunday morning, turn off that brain, and relax and listen to somebody speak nonsense to you for an hour and a half. You can still do it. my own father, he's a engineer, an environmental engineer. Smart guy. I've always thought that he was a really smart man. But when I have presented him with any kind of information, and I haven't really even talked to him about mythicism. I've just talked to him about like, hey, Noah's Ark didn't really happen, right? Like, Noah's Ark, like there wasn't a worldwide flood, right? And he was like, well, I suppose there was. And I'm like, why? And it's just that for the most part, he has got through life being able to, when it comes to the Bible, switch off his brain and not think as critically as he would for any other thing. And it's almost like I said, relaxing. It's almost something that just calms your heart rate, calms your brain. Now, of course, there's also times where you could go to church and get your heart rate up, especially if they're trying to connect their religion with politics or something. But nonetheless, it's still switching off that part of the brain that says, should I actually be listening to this? Should I actually be accepting what I'm hearing? Because it might not really line up with reality.
Yeah, it's almost like people come home from a high stressful job where their neurons are just firing on all cylinders. They come home and then watch WWF wrestling.
Yeah, it's a lot like that. It's a lot like that, and you don't question it because why not? It's entertainment. Yeah,
correct. But your dad obviously takes it more seriously than that, correct?
Yeah. Well, it takes like the Bible, you mean?
Well, okay. Let me ask: is he a fundamentalist Christian?
Yes.
What flavor?
Yes, a fundamentalist, young Earth creationist. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So he doesn't use that as entertainment per se. He takes that quite seriously.
Right, but I guess what I'm saying is that it is fairly cathartic, I guess, to just turn off the brain. It's not necessarily entertainment per se, but it's kind of like it, where you just kind of relax. And like you said, you're coming home from a stressful job. I can see how it could feel relaxing to say, you know what? I'm going to give all of my stress and my anxiety and my worries and my cares, I'm going to cast them on a God that I can't even really picture. But ultimately, if you can convince yourself that that's what you're doing, everything is fine. And you've got through life so far, right? So, right. Obviously it should be working. It reminds me a little bit of someone asked a long time ago, I saw online, where someone said, hey, why are so many professional athletes Christians? Why, or religious in some way? Why are they religious? Why are there not very many atheist professional athletes? And I'm sure there's some, especially in reality, they might not be that religious. But a lot of them are thanking God, and they wear crosses and all kinds of stuff around their necks, and Bible verses in their eye black, and all kinds of crap.
Yeah.
And the point is, somebody explained, if you're a kid and you pray to God and you say, God, I want to be an NBA star, and then you grow up and you're an NBA star, are you going to question God's existence? No, you're going to be like, wow, that guy's pretty good with me because he got me anything and everything that I've ever wanted. Why ever question God's existence at that point? There's no good reason to do it. So if you're raised in it, you're probably going to stick around in it if you're super successful.
Right. And that makes sense when your whole goal in life is centered on the advancement and the success of your career.
Yeah.
You're not going to go into a rabbit hole of, how do I say this? You're not going to go into a rabbit hole of questioning everything you've been taught. You're not going to go into what's the word I'm looking for? Basically, just questioning everything you've been taught, and then trying to relearn what you have, trying to learn what wasn't presented to you.
Oh yeah. I don't even know where they'd get the time, to be honest, especially these athletes and stuff like that. They've got to spend so much time devoted to their craft. But ultimately, that's what it is. I mean, maybe you'd find more atheists within the people who didn't make it. The people who almost made it to the NBA, but then they snapped their leg in half or something, you know what I mean? Or pulled a muscle. Right. I mean, maybe you have some people who were questioning God's existence then, but I mean, like I said, if you've made it this far and for the most part, you've believed in God and here you are, then, I can imagine that somebody might be like, you know what, I've made it this far. I'm not gonna question it. And I think that that's ultimately like where my father is, because it's a matter of again, just being raised in a religion and just turning off that part of your brain that questions things every Sunday morning. And then for the most part, looking up and saying, well, here I am. I've got my health. I got my family. I got everything that I want, I guess I'll keep turning off my brain on Sunday morning.
And not to mention the loss of friends and family. The peer pressure must be huge.
Oh, yeah. I mean, especially, I don't know if you're in the Bible Belt or not, but that's where I am. And, it's when I deconstructed, and this was years ago, but when I deconstructed, I had to pretty much rebuild, for the most part, any kind of friendships that I had. I had a few that stuck around, including, gotta love him, Matthew, my co-author. We've been friends since I was 10 and he was 11. So, I mean, we grew up together and everything. And when I deconstructed, at some point in time, I found out that he never really was part of the church too terribly much. But ultimately, we absolutely, had to rebuild our friendships with other people, and find people who we could connect to or connect with outside of the church. Because, I mean, it's not so much that we were shunned. I don't feel like we were shunned. It's just that people knew that we were, not to toot my own horn here, but people knew that we were smart. People knew that we would have conversations about this kind of stuff and that we would probably know more than they would about the topic. So people just chose not to even interact with us. Why bring up, to Matthew and Jaaron, why bring up the Bible and try to convince them to come back to church if they're going to tell you more about the Bible than you already know? They're going to put it back in your face. And so people just stopped talking to us, I think. So,
wow. And not to mention that they already believe that you've been influenced by Satan.
Yeah.
And so any conversation and this is why I say the Apostle Paul, but this is why the Apostle Paul says, don't have any dealings with apostates. Don't even eat with them or bid them Godspeed.
Yeah.
And that is to keep people in the cult. That is to keep people from leaving and to scare them from leaving. Because, hey, this is what's going to happen. This is what you can expect if you leave our faith and our network and our time.
And I know that there's plenty of examples in the world about, Christians who generally didn't shun their family members or friends or something when they left the church. There's plenty of examples of that. But ultimately, just like you said, the early version of this cult was absolutely a cult. It absolutely operated in that way. I mean, the concept of, if they were, if they're not with us, they were never with us. If they were never in us, they were never among us, that kind of thing. I mean, that's absolutely cult-like behavior that maybe not everybody follows today, but that's what it was back then. Christianity absolutely started as a mystery cult where you took part in rituals in order to be initiated into the cult. You learned about these different mysteries and these different beliefs and everything like that, and practices that were, maybe a little different from the cults around, but for the most part were very similar. And by and large, the earliest version of Christianity was, at least they swore by an oath not to do crimes. So at least they were decent people, but nonetheless, they were still a cult that did not like you when you left. Something that is interesting is, so Pliny the Younger, when he runs into Christians in 111, he explains that he tortured them to find out what they believe. And he finds that some of them, at the end of a spear, would recant and say, no, I'm no longer a Christian. Others, however, they would say they haven't been a Christian for years, a really long time. They would say, 20 years even. But here's my point. Why on earth, if he's going in and he's breaking up these meetings of Christians, they're clearly, the Christians that are in these meetings are people who have been there for quite some time. So they're obviously part of Christianity if they're in the meetings that he's going into. But what I'm saying here is, if it's true that he found some Christians who were like, I haven't been a Christian in a long time, or he found some people who said, I stopped being a Christian a long time ago. That means that they weren't in the meeting. They weren't in those meetings where he would break them up. He explains in the letter that people would rat each other out. And they would say, those people in specific, those people. So that either means that these people who are saying, no, I haven't been a Christian in a long time, they either were lying, or they may not have. They may not have been Christians for a long time, and the Christians were ratting them out because they left them. And they said, hey, you left the cult. I'm going to rat you out and see if Pliny starts knocking on your door with a spear.
You're going to suffer with us.
Yeah. And that's ultimately what Trajan writes back and says, hey, look, if people say that someone else is a Christian, you need to actually test them. You need to actually see if they are. Don't just immediately kill them. That was literally what he said. And he's literally trying to keep the peace in his empire while these Christians are ratting each other out. And it's awful.
And their only crime isn't what they believed. It was meeting in secret.
It was meeting in secret and not worshiping the Roman gods. You could be a Christian. You just had to worship the Roman gods too. And Pliny explains that he finds out that apparently Christians aren't allowed to do that. Like, a good Christian won't worship the Roman gods, but that is the rule. To the Romans, they don't care if you're a Christian or not. You just worship the Roman gods. Your inability, so to speak, of not worshiping the Roman gods, or you're like, oh, I can't do that and be a Christian, that's not their problem. The Romans, that's not my problem. The law is the law. So, that was the problem. You had to worship the Roman gods or pay a tax, I guess. But ultimately, as the Gospels come out, I think all four of the Gospels, at least three of them, but all four of them have the line that says, "Give to Caesar what is Caesar's." So in other words, if they come around and they say either worship the Roman gods or pay the tax, pay the damn tax.
Okay. So that was their out. Was in Pliny's letters, are there any examples where he gave them an out, where they were allowed to meet, they paid their tax? I mean, as long as they didn't meet in secret, I guess.
No, because he never gave them a permit. You had to have a permit. And he called them a secret brotherhood. Like he was like, we're trying to cut down on these. Just a few letters before he even writes that letter, he talks about how he had to break up a volunteer fire department because it's just, things would get political really, really fast back then. And there were little rebellions they constantly had to be putting out, little fires and stuff like that. So
I was going to ask about that. I mean, what were rebellions that?
Oh yeah,
were they that frequent?
It's because the Roman Empire, like in reality, we tend to think we tend to put our view of the government and how the government is able to more or less, I hate to use this term, but control us, or keep us, within certain boundaries, so to speak. We tend to put that and reflect it back on Roman Empire. And that just wasn't the case. The Roman Empire was constantly having problems with generals just randomly saying, you know what, let's go fight against someone, like they're just doing random stuff. They had generals being turncoats and switching sides mid-battle. I mean, people were constantly doing things. That's specifically why they had to have the no assembly without a permit law in more of especially some of the further reaching areas of the empire. And Asia Minor was one of the edges, so to speak, of the empire. Bithynia and Pontus, which is the province that Pliny was the governor of, it was on the coast of the Black Sea, so it was, had shipping ports and everything like that. But if someone wanted to start something, they could probably do some pretty good damage starting up there, and working their way into the Roman Empire. Rebellions were hard to put out, so you got to stop it while you can.
Okay. Yeah, and they didn't have, obviously they didn't have the communication that we enjoy today. So it's like, by the time this letter goes from here to there, a lot has happened.
Yeah.
So it's amazing that we have the letters that we have that have survived from that.
Oh, yeah.
It's amazing.
Pliny's letter, I was taking a look at it. It is incredible because, the letter about Christianity is one of the biggest letters that he writes. Like, it goes into, like, some people are like, well, he doesn't have that much detail. No. When people write letters back then, they were short and sweet. This is a huge one, which, to be fair, that's also a knock against Christianity because these New Testament letters are huge. They're massive. These letters are bigger than some books at the time. So, no. Like, Romans was not a letter from one person. That's insane. It's huge. A normal letter, like here's an example of one of Pliny's letter. This is just an average letter right here from Pliny to Trajan, right here. Boom, boom. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the entire letter. And then here's another letter from Pliny to Trajan. Here's a bigger one right here. It's just a paragraph. There you go. That's what a letter looks like. Romans is not a letter. Romans is a book. It is a treatise. It is an absolute slog. It is not a letter. No one would have written that long. Not to mention, Paul wrote the letter to the Romans before he leaves for Rome. Why he would write them the equivalent of a college textbook back then, before he heads up. he would probably make it there by the time the letter gets there. It doesn't even make sense.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you would have had to have carried it in a satchel. Just huge.
It's silly.
What is the title of Pliny's letters? That collection you have?
I mean, the collection that I've got here is just Pliny the Younger's complete letters. I just grabbed this on. It's from Oxford University Press. I just grabbed it on Amazon for pretty cheap, but it's not really titled because it's just letters. So the letters of Pliny the Younger.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's letters to Trajan, I guess you could say. And the particular letter is letter 96. He wrote like 100-something letters to Trajan.
Nice. And if we're going back a little ways, but you mentioned something about the gospel writers were named after generals of the Bar Kokhba revolt.
Oh, yeah.
Could you go back into that a little bit?
Well, not the gospel writers, but there are. So I don't have it in front of me, but like there's a John that is a general in the Bar Kokhba revolt. There's a Simon. There's even a Lazarus. I mean, we're talking, and then of course Bar Kokhba himself. His name is Simon. And then there is a Jesus that is said to have been this is from the Talmud, though. He's said to have been a student of Simon Bar Kokhba's priest, or not priest, priest. There was a particular Jewish priest or rabbi Akiva, I believe is his name. Rabbi Akiva is the rabbi to, like, the personal rabbi of Simon Bar Kokhba, and Rabbi Akiva had a student, according to the Talmud, whose name was Jesus. So there's a lot of potential of these particular names more or less being pulled from this. And Matthew's not here to defend himself or explain himself, but we were talking about this just the other day, and he said that he believes that the earliest form of the Gospels and everything like that was definitely very heavily, like Marcion's Gospel was very heavy on the Bar Kokhba references. And over time, a lot of those were taken out of the Gospels to put Jesus back in time even further. But yeah, but of course, when they start putting them back in time even further, they tend to mess up. In Luke, it says that Lysanias is I think a governor, or Lysanias is on the throne. He's someone in power, a man named Lysanias, when Jesus is born. But Lysanias, his reign ended in the middle of the 1st century BCE. So that's problematic. But as luck would have it, that's in the Gospel of Luke, at the beginning of the Gospel of Luke. And we found in stylometric analysis, through the stylometric analysis, we found that the author of the Gospel, the beginning of the Gospel of Luke, was either Polycarp or Irenaeus, a student or a teacher. And Irenaeus, he writes in the 2nd century, and he explains that he believes Jesus lived to be 50. Not sure where he got that number, but if he was responsible, or at least he knew his teacher was responsible, for the Gospel of Luke saying that Jesus was born during the reign of Lysanias, that would come out to about 50. That would come closer to 50.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So in other words, it's just more proof that Irenaeus is definitely behind the Gospel of Luke, him or Polycarp.
Yeah, I'm just reading through the first chapter of. Yeah, I don't see Lysanias. I see Herod.
So I apologize. It's not in the first chapter. It's in. I think it may have been. It's Luke, but it's either 2 or 3.
Okay.
Let me see here. I can find it real quick for you.
In the days of Caesar Augustus, Quirinius, governor
That's
of Syria.
Quirinius. Lysanias is it's verse 1 of chapter 3.
Okay.
It's at the end of it.
Yeah, he's all over the place. All of bits of chapter 2 should have been presented in chapter 3.
Yeah.
Okay, so where are we at? I'm in the 3rd chapter. What verse?
Verse 1, the end of verse 1.
End of verse 1. Okay. 15th year, reign of Tiberius Caesar, brother of Philip, Tetrarch, region of Etruria, Triocatus, and Lysanias, Tetrarch of Abilene.
Yep. And you can just do a quick Google search if you want of Lysanias. And Lysanias in specific is not lining up.
Tiberius isn't even, is Tiberius Caesar at this time?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of just, it's all over the place. I mean, yeah, he's actually a victim of his own kind of ideas, because he thinks adding more people will validate the timeline here. But there's just too many people. They just don't line up.
Right. Yeah, Tiberius comes before Nero, obviously. Mm-hmm. And then not Commodus. Who is after?
Is it Caligula?
No, not Caligula. He's after Nero, the Caesar that stuttered. Come on now.
Wait, after Nero, would it not be Vespasian?
Oof. Unless you're using his proper name.
Well, no, Vespasian, and then there's Titus, is it?
Yeah. So yeah, a lot of these Caesars are out of order, and you're out of order. Yeah, it's just it's weird. Brother Herod. Yeah. Caiaphas was actually a real. He was in charge of the Pharisees. He was actually a real person.
A real guy.
Out of order. Yeah, but he's out of order as well.
I'm telling you, it's as if they're trying to put it back in history. Yeah, they're just name dropping, but they're getting it wrong, and he's really just attempting to put it into a particular time period. Is the thing, because he's trying to come up with when Jesus and establish Jesus as a historical figure, when he was born and everything like that. He's trying really hard to do that, but he's failing miserably, because not only is he not lining up the people, but Irenaeus in specific was literally someone who believed that, again, Jesus was 50-something years old when he died. So he doesn't even line up with what the rest of the church fathers believed and said.
Did they believe he was crucified at age 50?
I think it. So his argument was that you have to be 50 in order to be a rabbi, is what he said. So as a result, he would be crucified probably around like age 53.
Okay. Oh, okay. He becomes a rabbi, then starts his ministry. Okay, got it. Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah. So as a result, he's pushing Jesus. According to Irenaeus, Jesus would have been born somewhere around like friggin' as early as like 56 or so BCE. Not 56. It would have been like 26, about like 26 BCE or so.
Oh, so that would put him at 60 plus BCE at the time of death. Do I got that right? No, 70. No, this would be closer to 70 BCE. So now we're talking about the destruction, the first destruction of the temple. I mean, is
Oh
that
no,
what
well,
they used?
okay, no, we're going backwards here. If Jesus dies in roughly 33, somewhere in there, under the reign of Pontius Pilate, so you subtract the 30, and then you got to add another 20 or so.
They're just going further back the
Yeah,
other way.
yeah, they're going over the line of BCE and CE. Yeah,
Gotcha. Okay.
so it would have been close to like 20 something BCE is when he would have been born. Is basically what he's trying to get at. And that would make sense if you're starting to put people in there who were definitely more into the 1st century BCE, if you're trying to date it that way. But it just doesn't line up. And it's pretty clear that he's reading some old text and he's trying to figure out when these people existed and stuff. But because like the older texts don't necessarily say in this year this person reigned exactly, like he's just kind of name dropping and having a hard time doing it. Because like even Josephus isn't super clear about every single passage. He doesn't say this happened in this year, this happened in this year, this happened. He just kind of says this is the overarching chapter that I'm going to talk about, and it's covering this time period. Here's the names. Here's what happened. And so you got to kind of piece it together and guess as to when some of these things are. So that's what he was doing. He was just guessing.
And it's not like they had history books to go to. For
not
reference.
easily. And like I said, just even if they had a history book, it's not going to tell him outright these people are in different times.
Oh, right,
it's just seeing them all within the same area of a book and thinking that they're all at the same time when they're not.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's very clear that they're just making it up. Like it's not historical. They're just guessing some stuff.
Man,
it's like really bad historical fiction.
Right, and you have to go with what you have, and if you don't have anything, you're just shaking the dice and just letting them fly and see what you get. It's wow.
And ultimately, you get away with it for a long time until later on people start, looking into other things that you didn't have at the time and doing archaeology that you couldn't do and finding that, wow, this is really off.
That's when scholarship comes on the scene and it's like, oops.
Well, that's when scholarship should come onto the scene and say, as a result, that makes the entire story questionable, so we should treat it like the Iliad or the Odyssey and just assume that it's just fiction. But I mean, it might be telling something or be a metaphor for something, but like the Odyssey, it's not real. Like these things didn't actually happen. These characters, especially the ones with the supernatural abilities, did not actually exist. But instead of doing that, the scholars just go, maybe he was off by a little bit. My bad. And they just kind of leave it there. And it's really disheartening because you have scholars like Mark Bilby, who's in the digital humanities. So he says, biblical scholarship needs data scientists. They need a lot of this. They just don't have it because the Venn diagram of people who are into religious studies does not overlap very much with the people who know how to run stylometric analysis on computers. Right. There's just a little bit of overlap. And that's where we exist. That's where Matthew and I exist. But it just doesn't tend to overlap very much.
Data science for scholarship.
Yeah. I mean, that's what you need, but not getting it.
Yeah, I hope they. Do you see? We'll cut this short. But do you see scholarship? Do you see an improvement? Is it changing for the better when it comes to biblical scholarship?
Yes. As more people find out about what we're talking about, not just from us, but other people are saying things too. We're not the only ones talking about this kind of stuff. there are people, even conservative Christians, who are starting to realize there's a wave coming, and that
they're
wave
falling.
is,
They're falling further and further behind the data field.
yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Because now we're living in a day and age where, you know, we're finally able to say, hey, let's let this computer run this test, this analysis on this test, and see what's going on. And we're basically saying this device, which is much smarter than us, which is capable of calculating things much faster than we would, let's see what happens when we let it have a go at the New Testament and see what happens. And sure enough, we're seeing these results. And there is a wave. The scholars that we have talked to have said, hey, there's a wave coming that is questioning the validity of the Bible. It's questioning the historical accuracy of the New Testament. It's questioning the authorship and composition dates of the New Testament.
And who wrote them? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, straight up church tradition is being uprooted by data science. It's only a matter of time.
This is unbelievable.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the next thing you're going to say is the Shroud of Turin is proven to be a fake. What is this world coming to? My God.
Yeah, exactly.
We have too many nails of the cross. What?
It's really interesting to see scholarship talk about this kind of stuff and slowly move in that direction. And what the most disheartening thing that we've found while talking to scholars is that in private, certain scholars will tell us Jesus didn't exist. It's made up. But that's in private. They specifically they don't want me to say who they are because they could lose their careers. And it sucks. It sucks to have to hear that when they're up there on a stage or they're writing books or they're teaching to a class and they're perpetuating this idea that Jesus probably existed. But in reality, they go, not a chance. And it's sad.
Yeah.
Because they know that they could lose their jobs if they came out public with it.
And also they'd have to contradict their earlier work. It's like.
Right. Bart Ehrman in specific will never become a mythicist, in my opinion. The reason why is because he says that mythicists are losers. And.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, I don't know what to even tell you.
Yeah. When he's talking about certain mythicists like Richard Carrier
and Price. Yeah.
Yeah, Price, and there's another one, Fitzgerald, who is
who's
literally, I mean, he's a nice man, but he's literally an acolyte of Carrier. So I think Jonathan Price, to me, is probably the only intellectually honest of the bunch. And some of their work has been shown to be misrepresenting of certain facts, not all of them, but certain things. And they didn't stand up under scrutiny. I used to have a partner that helped run this. He did all the scholarship of this podcast. And in fact, I think he may be following you on TikTok, Chris Hansen, but he is really super wizard when it comes to.
Wait, do you mean Chrissy Hansen?
Well, unless he goes by Chrissy, but it's Chris Hansen.
How long ago did you know this Hansen?
Oh, we're talking 2018, 17, 18, 19.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So
no, he was going to school at the time at a university in Michigan. And he talked a lot about he had all of these books, and we actually talked about certain works of mythicism, and he basically showed one of Richard Carrier's books. He said, there's an error. I'm looking right at it. If you look at
okay. So really quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
Really quick. That's Chrissy Hansen. It's Chrissy Hansen now.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That we talked with her for quite some time, and we actually quote her in our book. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, and she actually wrote a review. It was not a nice review, but she didn't understand stylometric analysis. She didn't fully get it, but she did write a review about our book, and it got peer reviewed.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow.
She just doesn't understand what stylometric analysis is. She did not get it correct. She did not understand what we were talking about.
Okay.
But she did write a review, and she was going back and forth against Richard Carrier there for a while.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe this is the right person we're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we talked with her for quite some time. Like a few hours or so, and shared with her some information and a copy of our book. She sent her book that just came out like a week ago or so. And so, yeah.
Nice. Oh, okay. Is this interview on any of your channels?
No, when we talked, it was private. It was offline.
It's private. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
What's the name of this book?
So her, I don't know it off the top of my head.
Okay.
I don't know if we had the name of it at the time or not. Give me 1 second here. I might be able to find it. We thank her at the end of our book. We may have. Oh man, I just don't know what. I don't remember what chapter in specific we.
But you do reference that semi-argument you had.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wait, which argument?
About whatever it was that she disagreed with you about.
Well, we don't talk about it. She didn't disagree with us when we talked to her on the call. She wrote a review and disagreed with us, but we're having to respond to it in our next work, in our next project.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Because her book just came out just about like a week ago or so. I think her book came out just about a week ago. Yeah. And that being said, her review of our work came out about 2 weeks ago. And it got peer reviewed, and it's come out in a journal here before too terribly long. But again,
is there any access to the review?
I don't think it's out quite yet. I don't think it's out quite yet. I don't think so. She shared with us what the review was, and she shared with us that it was peer reviewed and it would be coming out in a journal. But I don't know when exactly it's going to come out. But that being said, again, it is not a good review. She ultimately does recommend the book, but she did not get what stylometric analysis, like how it worked. And so ultimately she said that we were running it wrong, but I don't think she's familiar with how it works.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is a blast from the past. It's like I've not been in contact with this person in so long.
Oh yeah. But I think she follows us there on TikTok. Yeah, and that's how she ended up getting a hold of us.
Oh wow.
Was TikTok.
You wouldn't happen to know the book, the title of the book?
I think it had to do with Paul. So give me 1 second here. Let me see if I can. I think we quoted. Not for sure that we quoted it in our book. I just can't remember the name of it. We put the quote, or we put the citation, but I just don't know what chapter it's in. That makes sense.
Okay. But it is referenced in your book, the actual.
Yes, it is. It is referenced in our book. I'm just trying to find the citation for it. I'm just having a hard time. I don't know where it's at, but it's in here. I promise you it's in here. It's just I don't know where. I don't know what chapter it's after.
Yeah, because we haven't finished chapter 4 yet. We're almost there.
This is the most recent copy, right? Because we straight up mention her. Oh, this might be an early copy. Oh, that's why. This was a super early copy. I was like, why is it not in here? I apologize for all the dead space here.
No, don't worry about it. Don't you worry about it. This is your
Oh,
time.
yeah, there it is. So if you have a copy of the book, you can take a look. It's on. It's after chapter 8. It's the first. Yeah, the book is called. Her book is called "The Empty Prison Cell." It's in the chapter notes on chapter 8. So her book is called "The Empty Prison Cell: The Authenticity of Philemon Reconsidered."
Authorship of, one more time?
The Authenticity of Philemon Reconsidered.
Authenticity of Philemon. Oh, that's in reference to the slave Philemon.
Yes. Well, the book, at least. Yeah.
Right. The epistle.
Yeah.
Philemon Reconsidered. Well, holy shit. Is this... Well, I guess I can look it up on Amazon.
Yeah, it's on Amazon, I believe.
Oh, it is? Okay. Nice. I'm going to have to check that out.
Yeah. But, yeah, we cite her as Chris. It's just she goes by either Chris or Chrissy.
Okay. That's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is very interesting. Now, before we end this, where can people find you and your work?
So, easiest place to find me, other than here on this show, is on TikTok at TikTok, obviously.com or whatever. The handle, TikTok handle is at Christ Before Jesus. And then they're on Amazon. You can grab our book, Christ Before Jesus. The ebook version is just $2.99. I thought about potentially raising that eventually, but Matthew was like, don't. So no, we're just going to keep that ebook at just $2.99. There is a print version on Amazon as well. And there's an audiobook as well. There's an audiobook, and that's read by Matthew and I. And if you hop onto TikTok, you can get the print version, a signed copy. We sign copies or whatever, and then we'll put here's a signed copy, and then we'll put a little note in it and everything like that and send it out because TikTok wanted us to have some special edition version or something. So,
Gotcha. I have your Amazon link in all of the show notes. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start adding your TikTok profiles, and then that way when I copy and paste my show notes, they're always there.
Oh, awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you.
Not a problem. I can do that later. Now, the next time we have you on, let's see if we can get Matthew on. Do you think he'd be agreeable?
I can absolutely work on getting Matthew here. He just, he's just a busy guy. But I can absolutely work on getting his ass here because he does need to be here. Because we are here before you belong. I think we're slated in July. We're slated to have at least currently right now, they keep moving us because people keep backing out, but we're slated to have a debate live on YouTube on Modern Day Debates. And it's so far our opponents right now are Cliff and Stu Nechtel, those those Christians, that street preachers at colleges and whatnot.
Okay.
Yeah.
I may have seen a meme or a video of them. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not totally familiar with them, but I'm familiar with the brand of. I know what you're going to be going up against. And are these people? Are they backing out? Are they the ones kind of pushing it?
So Modern Day Debates has tried in the past. James over there has tried to get us a debate going. It's just that Christians, he's having some hard time. I think it's not so much that they're backing out. Really, it's that they keep having different things that they got to take care of. Okay. But I will say, hopefully Cliff and Stu are able to do it. We'd enjoy getting in there and talking with them and seeing what we can do. But that's coming up sometime in July, I think the 19th, I believe. But we've got some things slated here on our to-do list and whatnot. And yeah, so we're excited about what scholarship is moving towards and how we can be a part of that. Despite not being scholars ourselves, we're at least trying to get that conversation started. That's the point. And again, if anybody has any questions or anything like that, you can obviously see our work on Amazon for Christ Before Jesus, and then you can check us out on TikTok at Christ Before Jesus.
Okay. Would you like to do a follow-up before or after the 19th? What would you be most comfortable with?
Oh man. Well, if it ends up actually happening and they do accept it, you know what? As soon as we hear back that they have accepted, we will reach out to you guys. If we find out that they accept like a couple days before and then we do it, we'll do it afterwards. If they accept well in advance, then we'll come on here before. But I will let you or Sweet Pea know that we need to come back on.
Yeah, and just let us know, and again, let Matthew know this is friendly territory. We're not gonna put him on blast. I mean, if there was something so egregiously obvious that even I could pick up on, that'd be a different story. But
well, we need to grill him a little bit. We need to grill him.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't really seen anything. I haven't really seen any red flags, anything that sparks
and
suspicion. So I mean,
biggest concern is making sure that we don't come across as like conspiracy theorists or something, because ultimately we don't say it's a conspiracy. It's just kind of the evolution of religion. It's nothing that crazy.
And see, that's my background is conspiracy theory. I was neck deep in conspiracy. I mean, some of the craziest things you could think of, I probably believed it. If you just were to spit, oh, what about this? What about this? Yeah, I think I believed in that as well. So that's why my not hackles, but my antennas go up when I hear conspirator, because I don't want to end up. I don't want to go back. I don't want to go back to that, and I don't want to believe in something with very scant evidence. But it sounds good to me, so I'm going to believe it. Because I almost got taken up with Jesus mythicism back in 2017, 2018. And, I had to get set straight on a few things. And so, but this definitely sounds more reasonable, more realistic. I mean, we all know that religions change over time and beliefs get solidified and things get changed. I mean, there are cargo cult religions out there that within 50 years they had an entire belief system based on
John Frum.
Right. It's just crazy. And it's like, well, when you add 200 years, what could you possibly come up with in 200 years? A lot. So it's not above the pale to think that these things a lot of it was just added and made up of whole cloth. But please let Matthew know. And again, the floor is yours. I I've jotted down quite a few notes and things that we've talked about in the past. So if he wants to review and give his side and his study and expertise, that's totally fine. There's no pressure. As you know, we have not stuck to it's got to be regimented and we got to stick to these topics.
Yeah.
We can cover whatever you want to talk about. And I think a free-flowing dialogue is the best way I've found to interview people. So
right.
I'm all good with it. I'm good with it. Well, Jaaron, it was great having you. This has been a blast every time. Every time you come on, it's a joy. So we hope to have you back.
Yeah.
And we hopefully we haven't burned you out in two episodes. Because this could easily become 3 hours. I mean, it really can. So
there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of that rabbit hole, and amazingly, Matthew and I, to this day, like we keep finding things in specific that keep furthering. You would imagine that after 2 years of looking into this, that we would probably find something that would, if it was wrong or if we were wrong, we would find something that would just absolutely blow us out of the water. But there hasn't been anything. Next time, write it down if you can. There were documents that were discovered. Just, you know what? Just write these 2 words down. Vesuvius, like the mountain, Vesuvius documents, and just ask us about them next time we're on.
Okay. Vesuvius
because if there's things that are gonna prove us wrong, it would be something like this. So, yeah, just ask us about them next time we're on.
Okay, I'm not even gonna look them up. I want my virgin ears exposed to virgin information.
Well, we will do our best. We will do our best to explain it and talk about it.
Yeah. Let Matthew know that you had such a good time, and
yes.
We want him to come join us. We'd love for him to come join us.
Sounds good. Well, thank you very much for having me on.
All right, thank you so much. This is the Biblical History Skeptics podcast signing off. Thank you for tuning in and not tuning out. We will see you next week, bright and early. Take care, everybody. All right, see you later, Jaaron.